are live. You can get started, Kim. Hei-ock, sorry. Dr. Kim, whenever you're ready.
Oh, I thought you were going to open.
I should open? Oh, my
Yeah, yeah.
My pleasure. Hello, everybody. My name is Alor Calderon. I am the director of the Employer Rights Center. I am so happy to be here today. Can't tell you enough about the thought that went into and the importance we think at the Employer Rights Center to have this discussion. And the Employer started in 1999. We've been around into about 23 years. And over that time, I've been doing this work for more than 15 years. And something that I learned early on in my life, which can apply to this work, is one of the best things you can do is to listen and to check your assumptions. And something that I learned early on in my life is that, one of those things that really does affect us that sometimes we don't want to think about is how gender is in everything that we do. But somehow the language, the work doesn't go into it. So early on in our work, when you deal with a union or with the workplace, there's almost no gender language. But over the years, people that have to deal with everyday work, gender is critical to bring a power imbalance that I think probably all of us have felt at some time or another. In fact, it's almost one of those open secrets that we all know that people want to and use against others so that they don't raise in power. However, it didn't come out before and it's starting to come out. And so one of those things, unfortunately, is violence. One of those things is happen at work. And we always associate domestic violence with sort of private life. Here at the Employer Rights Center, we hear violence at work all the time. And so to us, it's very important to move justice forward, is to have a gender equity focus and to think about how it's in everything that we do. And so that's why we're committed to have a monthly discussion about this. And one of our most important partners in this is Dr. Kim. It's Dr. Hei-ock Kim of the Kim Center for Gender Equity. I can't hear it, sorry. I probably
Social balance.
Social balance, sorry, it's in the back. I should know that. And then we have great panel speakers that I think they're going to bring a perspective on this. I very much appreciate it. The Employer Rights Center does and want to help with each of these cases that are being dealt with today. And so thank you very much for being here. And hopefully we'll have a great discussion. And for us, at least once a month and hopefully much more. Welcome, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thanks, Alor. I am, as he said, Dr. Hei-ock Kim. I'm the executive director and founder of the Kim Center for Social Balance. We are a San Diego nonprofit with a national mission to accelerate the achievement of equal status for all genders in the workplace. Today, we're here to discuss what's happening right now with employees who are suffering from domestic violence in the pandemic environment, as well as what you can do as a victim, an advocate, or an employer. At this time, I'd love to introduce my colleagues. Thank you all so much for being here and contributing your expertise and time. Starting with Claudia Grasso. She's the Assistant Chief of the Family Protections Division of the San Diego District Attorney's Office, where she prosecutes cases of domestic violence, child abuse, elder abuse, and animal abuse. Claudia is also the president of the San Diego Domestic Violence Council, which is a collaborative made up of partners from various perspectives in San Diego County who assist victims of domestic abuse and educate the community on the prevention of domestic abuse. Lauren Bushman is an attorney at Tencer Sherman, LLP, where she provides employment advice and advocates for companies in business and employment litigation. She also co-chairs the Gender Equity Committee of the Lawyers Club of San Diego. And then I have the privilege of serving with Tiana Uribe as Commissioner on the Status of Women and Girls for the county. Tiana is currently chair of the Domestic Violence Committee at the Commission, and we are mandated to advise the San Diego County Board of Supervisors on areas of concern to women's lives and needs in San Diego County. Tiana is also the broker of True Financial Services and founder of the Wildflower Initiative, which is a nonprofit organization empowering women and children through literacy. Thank you all so much for being here, and let's dive into the conversation. So Tiana, I wanted to start with you and ask, domestic violence is a focal point for the Women's Commission. Can you explain why?
Thank you, Hei-ock, so much for the introduction. I'm happy to be here. This is an important conversation for us to be having, and a timely one especially during an unprecedented pandemic. Domestic violence is commonly seen as a gender issue because the majority of incidents involve female victims and male perpetrators. This is actually one of the areas the Commission focuses on, along with homelessness and human trafficking, which also affect women and girls disproportionately. Claudia, I know you're still tracking 2020 statistics on domestic violence cases, and you've already seen a 3% uptick from reported cases this time from last year. Can you describe to us how the pandemic and lockdowns are making things worse for employees?
Absolutely. Thank you, Hei-ock and Tiana, for having me here today. It's a pleasure, and anytime imparting information that can help at least one victim makes it worth it. Tiana, to put it in context, in 2019, there were 17,434 calls reporting domestic abuse to law enforcement. There were 13 homicides related to domestic abuse, domestic violence, plus 4 more where unfortunately we had a situation where a perpetrator killed his ex-wife and her 4 children. And so it's something that it's pervasive through San Diego County, and to see a 3% uptick is quite significant. And the reason why it's worse right now for employees is because there is no outlet. So first and foremost, many employees have lost their jobs during the pandemic, and some are furloughed and they're working at home, which that means they are now barricaded with their perpetrators. And with shelter in place, kids are not going to school, restaurants are closed, people are not getting together with family and friends. And all of those are traditional outlets for reporting, either reporting to a family, to a neighbor, to a friend, while taking the kids to school. One can report because they know children are safe at school in that environment, going to work and perhaps confiding in a coworker. That is not happening right now during shelter in place. And so we fear that there are many victims who cannot report because they are under the watchful eye of a perpetrator who is probably working from home as well, tracking phone calls, tracking movements. And if you add alcohol or drugs to the mix, that just makes the problem so much worse and violent.
It's almost overwhelming. Lauren, how does domestic violence manifest in the workplace? Oops, you're on mute.
Rookie Zoom mistake, I apologize. You think we'd all know by now.
I know.
The quick thank you to everyone for having me here. I'm very excited to be here to speak with you on this topic. As far as domestic violence, domestic abuse manifesting in the workplace currently, as far as the employers that we counsel in during the pandemic, since the beginning of it, we've seen an uptick in civil workplace restraining orders. I'd say for as many as I've filed on behalf of employers in the past 5 years, that amount has been filed also since lockdown, since we went into stay at home in March of 2020. So what a workplace civil restraining order is an employer can actually, on behalf of the company or an employee, seek a civil restraining order to protect either people at the office or that employee, if there are threats of violence being directed towards that employee, or there is risk of violence occurring in the future, or it has occurred in the past at the place of work. So that has become a concern for employers. People, are obviously not in their best state of best mental health right now with being in lockdown during the pandemic, and unexpected things are happening. So as employers are notified by their employees, or they learn of potential threats to the workplace, they are reaching out to either attorneys to help them file these civil restraining orders, or as employers, you can file these yourself at the courthouse on behalf of your workplace and your employees. So that's definitely something we've seen increase. Also, providing time off. If you are so lucky to be employed during the pandemic, employers are having and getting to provide time off to employees so that they can take time away from work to seek their own restraining orders, whether it's for themselves or their children, but providing that time off and job protected leave to go take action and seek the resources that the employee needs to protect themselves both at home and the workplace against domestic violence.
Thank you, Lauren. These are such important resources. For employees who may think they're alone in this fight, can you tell us how employees are supported by the law?
Absolutely. Great question, Tiana. So there is lots of California law that employees may or may not know about. Employers who employ more than 25 people, so a company of 25 or more employees actually has a duty to inform their employees what their rights are as domestic violence victims. Usually, hopefully, when I counsel employers, it's in the form of an employee handbook or some sort of written notice when an employee starts their job. So employers who are following this law, who have over 25 employees, hopefully their employees are being notified of what their rights are. Even if you work at a company with less than 25 employees, you still have rights under the California Labor Code. The specific section is called the Survivors of Domestic Violence Employment Leave Act. It's Labor Code Section 230. And it provides several protections to employees facing domestic violence, domestic abuse issues. If you need to take time off work, like I was saying before, your job will be protected. If you need to take time off to seek a restraining order, if you need to take time off to ensure that your family is safe for whatever reason, providing notice to your employer as it permits is helpful and required. And then the employer needs to respect that employee needs time away from their desk, their job, whatever it may be, to make sure that they can get the help that they need. If there is an emergency situation, on the other hand, and an employee isn't able to show up for work that day, or several days while they seek shelter, seek a restraining order, etc., employees can provide delayed notice to their employer, whether it be in a restraining order that they've obtained from the court, from a medical doctor, a medical note stating that they were suffering or seeking assistance related to domestic violence. There are protections that the employee can come back and explain to their employer, look, I was out these couple days, but here's the reason why. And your job will be protected under the California Labor Code. There are other, once the initial help is obtained, so the restraining order or the time off needed to situate yourself, once you're ready to come back to the office, there are certain protections that California law requires employers offer to employees. So if the employee comes forward and says, I'm dealing with this issue, the employer is required to keep that information confidential. So it shouldn't be talked about to other employees. It's under the law, it should be a safe space to talk. And again, it will remain confidential. You don't have to worry about someone finding out. And employers, it's important to know that you have those confidentiality responsibilities. The next step under the law is to work with the employee, to provide any accommodations that employee needs because of what they're facing, either at work, at home, somewhere in between. We encourage employers to sit down with their employees and understand what they need, whether it's a change in job duties, whether it's a change in location, whether it's something as simple as putting a lock on the door to the office or their office. Any easy it doesn't have to be easy, but any protections that the employer can put in place that will make the employee feel more secure at work. And sometimes it's just a simple conversation of, look, you know, I'm fearful of this person, and I want you to know that if they show up, this is our plan. You know, do we have a plan in place? What do we do if that happens? And communicating that to your employer gives you protections under the California Labor Code. So I feel like I say this a lot, and you'll probably hear me say this a lot during our program today, but communication is key. And knowing that you are protected as an employee, knowing that you're protected under the law, not to be afraid to disclose these things to your employer, because your employer can't help you with things that they don't know about. So hopefully, you know, I encourage employers to read up on their obligations, to consult with an employment attorney to ensure that when these situations do arise, you're ready to support your employee and you're ready to, frankly, fulfill your duty required under California law.
Thank you, Lauren. That's really good guidance for both employees and employers. And I know that everybody does need that kind of guidance. Claudia, in addition to the uptick in reported cases, I know you're also really concerned about the number of unreported cases. Can you describe why some of the reasons, what are some of the reasons that victims don't speak up?
Sure, Hei-ock. And I love what Lauren said about communication is the key, because employers cannot protect employees if they don't know about it. But unfortunately, there are many factors that prevent victims from reporting or from saying anything to their employers. I would imagine the first and foremost is fear of getting fired. If the situation is volatile enough, then the fear of having your perpetrator show up at work and causing a scene, or perhaps even hurting a co-employee that may intervene, that's a big factor to hold back and not say anything. With domestic violence, there's a lot of shame. There's a lot of shame that we see with victims because domestic violence happens to every socioeconomic level, every race, everybody. It just, we've seen it from educated, and I'm going to use women because the pervasive amount is a male perpetrator on females, though we acknowledge that obviously females can be perpetrators, and we do have an increase in same-sex domestic violence among same-sex couples as well. But there is a sense of shame. I mean, we do get victims at the DA's office that are educated, that are well off, that come from great families, that are ashamed, are very ashamed that this happened to them, or more so the way they verbalize or they articulate it is that they allowed this to happen to them. They didn't see this coming. And so many times they don't say anything because of fear of just, you know, they're ashamed, or fear that no one's going to understand. With domestic violence also comes a lot of isolation, and that's part of the power and control dynamic that happens in domestic violence relationships, where the one thing that happens is isolation. Isolate the victim from their family, from their friends, from their social circles. And so once that victim feels that he or she is isolated, they no longer have someone that they can confide in, or they feel that they can confide in. So that sense of isolation prevents them from feeling as if they can confide in a coworker, in their employer, because no one will understand. A huge factor that we see is fear of retribution from the perpetrator. Many times there are many threats that go along with this, not only physical abuse, but the psychological and the emotional component that comes with it. And that's why we call it domestic abuse, not necessarily violence, because violence is one factor under abuse. There is also the emotional, the psychological, and the threats. The fear of retribution is huge, because many times if there are children involved, the threat is, you know what, I'm going to take, if you tell anybody or if you say anything, I'm taking the children and you'll never see them again. Also threats to the pets. We see that, and that's why we took on at the district, at our district attorney's division, in the family protection division, the prosecution of animal abusers, because there's a huge correlation between animal abuse and domestic violence, because many times perpetrators threaten to hurt or do hurt pets. Also, there is the fear of deportation. Many times perpetrators pull that over a victim's head who is either a resident or undocumented, and basically saying, look, you let anybody know, you're going to get deported, and then you can't come back into this country, you cannot see your kids. And so the fear of retribution is also a huge factor of why victims many times do not report or fear reporting to their employers. They so need this job, and it's such an outlet for them that they don't want to jeopardize it. And they fear that bringing this problem to work would jeopardize their position.
Thank you, Claudia. That's such important and vital information. Lauren, you said your favorite part of your job is to advise employers on difficult situations before they get out of hand. Can you tell us some of the ways you educate and prepare employers to manage domestic violence related issues for their employees? Absolutely. It is definitely one of my favorite parts of my job. To circle back quickly, Claudia, to your point of the shame of reporting and it happening to any socioeconomic class. I've, in the last couple of months, filed restraining orders on behalf of other attorneys with other law offices. So it's, what you said is exactly right. It can happen to anyone. And, I encourage anyone, regardless, to seek the help that they need. So back to my favorite part of my job, and as gratifying as it is to help those people file those restraining orders, help people feel more safe at work. The part that brings me the most joy is getting ahead of it. So educating employers to know how to respond to the situation before it even happens, having a plan. And most people think, like with most domestic violence abuse, it won't happen to me. This wouldn't happen to me, right? But it's nice to always have a plan because you never know. So education is key with employers, educating employers and employees, because again, it has to be a conversation. You speak with your boss, coworkers, people that report to you every day, and you talk about, I'm sure, family stuff, and there's of course parts that are going to be left out, especially if it's not as exciting to talk about. And I think that the open lines of communication is most important. And whether it has to be an employee educating the employer on protections under California law, or the employer hopefully educating the employee, it's the communication. Of course, I encourage employers to have a solid employee handbook. There should be dedicated sections to rights that domestic violence victims have, set out in clear, concise language about the time that they can take off, the job protected leave. You're not going to lose your job if you take time off for this purpose, to seek help, protect yourself or your family. California mandates paid sick time off for almost every employer. If the employee works over 30 hours for the employer in a year, they get 1 hour of paid sick time, paid sick leave. This can be used for that time. So it may not even have to be unpaid time that the employee gets to take off. And just educating employers on that so that they know, okay, if the employee needs to take the time off, oh, well, they have the paid sick leave. So they don't even have to take, they don't have to lose any money from their pay while they take this time off. Again, it's about education and communication. And the other thing that I don't think is talked about as much, that I try to get ahead and counsel my clients on ahead of time, is the retaliation and discrimination part of it. If an employer knows, or an employee reports to them and makes them aware that they're a victim of domestic violence, domestic abuse, the employer, it is illegal for the employer to discriminate against them on that basis for that reason. It is illegal for the employer to retaliate in any form, whether that's a demotion or a pass up for a promotion, or reducing their wages, anything of that nature.
because they are a victim of domestic violence, and because they need to take time away to ensure their safety and take action and take steps that they need to confirm their safety. So definitely my favorite part is the education in advance, so that employers and employees know and are educated on the law. So if and when, unfortunately, something does come up that's in this realm, they know they are able to take those steps without the worry. There's enough worry going on already, right? If you're dealing with a situation like this. So a worry of, oh, am I gonna lose my job? Do I have to take a pay cut? Do I have to take time off to do all this? Will my job be there for me when I get back? Is my employer gonna retaliate against me? Is my employer gonna discriminate? Educating the employer that absolutely not. Let's be there for those employees during this time. And if wanting to be there for your employees isn't enough, California law will make you. And there is recourse for employees if this does happen to them, which we can talk about, I think, as we move along here.
Thank you, Lauren. One of the reasons I'm so happy to have both you and Claudia here is to really drive home the point that there are legal protections, that it's a real thing that employees can rely on, as well as employers, for guidance into what kind of behavior they can use to help their employees. In light of these legal protections and some of the issues that you brought up, the fear of being deported, et cetera, what does it look like, for example, for a victim to have a plan or work out a plan with their employer to protect their jobs while protecting themselves, and just to get out of that headspace of, oh my God, my world is crumbling, everything's going to go to crap. And to be able to say, no, I can get a handle on this. I just need to do, at the very least, X, Y, and Z. And this is for both of you.
Can I jump in before? Because Lauren brought up a great, I guess, a reminder for me. Frequently, we do get employers and co-workers asking us, wow, we didn't see that coming. We didn't know he or she was being abused for so long or in a violent relationship. What are the signs? How could we have seen this coming? And in reality, if a victim wants to hide it, many times you probably cannot. But there are some red flags. You hear about victims wearing long pants, long sleeves, even in the hottest days, sunglasses, hiding some injuries, or saying, my gosh, I'm such a klutz. I always walk into, doors and banisters when asked, how did you get those injuries? Another one is if there is an inordinate amount of calls coming in from their significant other. Many victims maybe masquerade and say, oh, he's just, basically loves me, wants to make sure I'm okay. But the incessant calls could be a red flag that something is going on there in terms of power and control. And again, the sense of being nervous all the time and jittery and maybe withdrawn. If coworkers go out for dinner, not ever joining, or saying, I have to ask permission or check in and make sure it's okay. Things like that. The not, having a job, but yet never having any money, never making financial decisions, because again, that power and control dictates that the perpetrator is the one who doles out the money, who makes the financial decisions. Many times, victims have to turn over their paychecks to the perpetrator, and they decide what money is spent and not. And so little signs here and there, but in reality, I mean, many of us are not, fortunately, are not faced with domestic violence, and it's tough. It's tough to identify it, but there's certain things that sometimes I say, you get the spidey sense that something is off, and maybe just, are you okay? Or reaching out, or is there anything, you need, or, whenever you're ready to talk, I'm here. Just letting a victim know that they can open up. And no one can dictate when they report, but knowing that someone is going to be there. to listen when they are ready to talk about it is huge. And so going to the safety plan, what can victims do? And I know Lauren's going to talk about the workplace, but we talk a lot about safety plan in the realm of, we recognize that victims are not always ready to report the abuse. And that's okay, because they have, their reasons, and they have a family unit that they're trying to keep together. And for a variety, the choice has to come from them. They have been stripped of all their power and all their control, that we are here to be non-judgmental, to listen, and to go on their time frame. But one thing we do ask is, if you want to stay, not want, but if you stay in the relationship, please have a safety plan in place. And that entails things like, for example, wear clothing with pockets in it, because if you have your phone, you can always have your cell phone on you in case you have to call for help quickly. If you have your own car, maybe have a packed bag in your trunk with copies of your identification, with some cash, with a change of clothes in case you have to leave immediately. Teach your children and have a code word. So again, your children, your neighbors, your family know that if you utter this code word, that is the signal to call police right away. Strangulation, we have seen an uptick in strangulation, and the studies have shown that when strangulation is introduced to the dynamic of violence in the context of domestic violence, that victim now is upwards 400% chance of being killed. And so we talk to victims about, don't wear necklaces or scarves or anything that can be used to strangle. And so there are things like that that can help a victim get out and have that plan in place. And I think a huge thing is when they're ready to talk to someone, it doesn't necessarily have to be law enforcement, but they can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And that is the umbrella, if you will, where they can connect a victim with localized resources. And they're tuned into every resource in the United States. And that's a great place to start for a victim who wants to find out about resources, even if they are not ready to leave the relationship. And that number is 1-800-799-7233.
Great tips, Claudia. Important, whether you're hearing them for the first time or to refresh, and again, plan for sometimes the unexpected, or to plan for someone, like you said, if you're getting that spidey sense in the workplace, that your coworker may need some help. Checking in on people, most of us are working remotely via Zoom. If you usually hear from that coworker and you haven't heard from them in a couple weeks, and you're, getting that gut intuition feeling, reach out to them. And sometimes it's as simple as making those resources available, saying, hey, I don't know if this is going to be helpful to you, but while you're able to rationally think through the situation, just offer a direct telephone number or a website where they can go to hopefully find the help that they need. As far as if in the more formal workplace structure, again, getting ahead of it and being educated on the employer side, and as an employee, having a good policy. If you're an employer, I implore you again to get that clear written policy so that you distribute it to all of your employees upon hire. And if you don't have it, if you haven't done that upon hire, to get a clear drafted policy to circulate to your entire office tomorrow. If you're an employee who's either, facing these issues, or you think someone else in your office may be facing these issues, to be brave enough to ask your boss, hey, do we have a domestic violence victims policy in the office where we provide time off if people need to seek the help? We should do some research or call an attorney, or the Labor Commissioner's website has some great resources of of requirements that employers have to offer, the notice that they provide, especially if you employ more than 25 employees. The written notice is required upon hire. So checking those boxes on the front end and making sure we're educated and we know our rights, so that when life does come at us in these unfortunate situations, we know, okay, I have the protected leave. I can talk to my employer about this. If I notify my employer, I automatically get some time off to handle this. If it's happening, before we can even catch our breath, okay, these are the documents that I need to provide to my employer on the back end, so that they don't think that I've abandoned my job because I haven't shown up for 3 or 4 days. To get your paperwork in so that you can communicate again, the lines of communication, and as an employer, opening those lines of communications to your employees. If you sense something again going on, hey, we have this policy, just letting you know if you need the time off, it's yours. Employers reiterating to their employees, we don't discriminate and we don't retaliate against people who need to take time off to ensure that them and their family are safe during these times. Because as we've learned, 2020 is a bit crazy and anything can happen. So being prepared, knowing your rights, and having a plan and a policy, mainly a policy in place of what people are able to do as far as time off from work and job protected leave to address their situation as they need.
Thank you, Lauren. And how, for those who are afraid of deportment or who are being threatened with it, what are the real fears? What fears do they need to worry about, and what are fears that they don't need to worry about happening in terms of legal protections? Will they need to divulge anything that might get them deported to their employer? Or is that, can they proceed like anybody else who might need these protections?
Claudia, I'll let you jump in if you have anything, but a little bit different area of the law as far as the protections to the employees under the domestic violence victims and victims of domestic violence. Again, the retaliation and discrimination tied at all to the domestic violence, reporting, or the fact that you're a victim. Nothing else, whether your status of citizenship is kind of secondary to all of this. So I would encourage employees not to worry about that. And because I don't want to say trigger the protections under the Labor Code of California, but you essentially do. The protections are there. Once you communicate to your employer, this is what you're facing, they have to permit this time off for you to address the situation. And that's created, I think, by the legislature and the law, so that the employee doesn't have to worry about the other stuff. They don't have to worry about being deported. They don't have to worry about their citizenship status. They don't have to worry about losing their job. They don't have to worry about taking unpaid leave if they have vacation or sick pay accrued. So hopefully the law is made to create the space to allow a carved out time away from work and the other life issues that you're dealing with, to focus specifically on this to address the domestic violence issues that you're facing.
Yeah, thank you for that. Go ahead, Claudia.
If I may. And when a victim reports to law enforcement, and it's actually illegal for law enforcement to ask their status. Law enforcement will not ask, are you a citizen? Are you, if you're legally, they cannot. And the same goes obviously for the district attorney's office. We don't record that. We don't ask that. That is not something that plays into, anything as far as prosecution. Yes, there are avenues for those that are undocumented to later pursue something called a U visa. That is set up specifically for victims of crime. That's a separate area of law, and that's something very entirely different. However, victims, we provide services for all victims regardless.
Thank you, Claudia. I did post the hotline in the chat, but Tiana, can you point us to some other valuable resources for victims and advocates?
Yes, thank you so much. And Claudia, I know she mentioned the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which I'm going to reiterate. That number is 1-800-799-7233. We did post that in the chat. Additionally, we've got the San Diego District Attorney's Office webpage, which we posted in the chat as well, and the San Diego Domestic Violence Council webpage, which is a very, that's Claudia's office. They do a great job at maintaining webinars, recordings, trainings, and even for teen dating violence, of which I'm a part of that committee. It's unfortunate this abuse and violence can start at a very young age. And so it's really important for not only employers and employees, but parents and children to, understand a lot of these, aspects of abuse and violence. We wanted to also know from Lauren, what are some resources for employers?
Great question. If you're an employer, start by Googling California Labor Code Section 230. Paragraph C is specific to the domestic violence victims. If you have over 25 employees, Google the same, California Labor Code Section 230.1. It's a little bit of a dense read. Call an attorney if you need help, but start there. It outlines your obligations beautifully. The Labor Commissioner's Office, the California Labor Commissioner's Office, offers some great PDF pamphlets. It's a simple Google away to break down notice that you need to provide to your employees, the breakdowns of the leave and the unpaid or paid time off that the employer is required to provide. And if all else fails, call your favorite employment attorney. They'll know how to help you.
Sorry, I have a very errant cat here who's insisting on having her way, and she's got the claws to back it up. There's something in the chat that a listener shared, and it looks like at some point the comments are directed toward you, Lauren. A recent report from the Maryland-based study to study child custody proceedings reveal that mothers who seek family court interventions to protect themselves and their children are disbelieved at high rates, despite no support to suggest that women are lying or wrong about abuse, to the extent that the courts are finding this. And yes, this is also the case in many situations like sorry, I just got distracted, but many situations where women are in the courts and things have to do with their children and abuse, they are not believed. Let's see, there are other stressors that take them away from their ability to perform. There are financial strains. So Ms. Bushman talked about the workplace helping provide relief of these circumstances through protected leave, et cetera, for employees going through this process and seeking to protect themselves and their families as they leave abusive situations. However, these systemic failures in our court systems exacerbate the strain of domestic abuse on both employers and employees. What role, if any, and then it drops off. I somehow, the question didn't make it. But do you want to comment, either of you, on this?
Very astute observation. I've found in filing the civil harassment workplace restraining orders, obviously both sides need to be heard if the respondent chooses to appear to defend their situation, but I have found that the judges in San Diego Superior Court have been, frankly, very helpful to people seeking the restraining orders. The first step is usually a preliminary injunction, a temporary restraining order, and there's a bit of paperwork required and then filed at the business office downtown. Not to say the threshold is low, because it's definitely not. It's a very serious thing to take away somebody's rights, but the employers that I've helped and the employees that I've helped thus far have been believed. The judge says, this is enough. We've got it. Here's your temporary restraining order. If there is a true threat of violence, or there's something that's happened in the past that we're worried about happening again, I think people are more aware now of the unexpected workplace violence, whether you know, someone shows up with a gun or someone shows up to be violent at the workplace where the doors are generally open and unlocked during business hours. A little bit different now, but we're also seeing situations where there's only 1 or 2 employees in the office right now. And so it presents a situation where, you know, there's not 10 eyes and ears alert as to who's coming through the front door. It's only 1 or 2 people at the office by themselves. So I think that the temporary restraining orders are being granted as necessary. And then once that's put in place, more immediately for the employee and the employer going back for the permanent restraining order hearing. The judges are hearing a lot of what's going on right now, and the testimony has definitely been being heard is how I'm feeling, thankfully.
And the courts are closed for many things, but not for restraining orders. They are definitely open, and absolutely they are open for business for that. And there are many organizations also that help if victims need to file restraining orders. There is Legal Aid Society, there's the San Diego Volunteer Lawyers. Many of them are housed in the courthouses as well. And they have live presence and also phone presence to assist with the paperwork.
That's really great to know. There's another question. Do you believe the private sector can play a role in mitigating the negative effects of the failing system? Sounds like it's not so much failing in San Diego, but perhaps other areas. Oh, it's part of the same question, but the impact on our employees, our workplaces, and the economy.
Absolutely. I think that the employers need to be the leaders in this situation. They need to provide the clear policy. They need to make sure their employees know that they'll be protected if and when this does come up. And again, that's why it's really my favorite part of my job most days, because getting the education out there and speaking about it and holding events just like we are now, making sure employees are apprised of the leave that they can take. And when an employee approaches their employer, it's not the first time the employer is hearing about it. You know, California employers are generally good at knowing that they need to brush up on these laws, because there are a lot of laws that can trip them up and they find themselves in big trouble when an employee, you know, there's a miscommunication or the employee hasn't come to them to explain the situation, or they haven't been aware of the employee's situation and a lawsuit pops up on the other hand. And that's definitely, I don't like dealing with it in the hindsight. I would much prefer that I would implore the employers to take us, there's a lot of end of year seminars right now. Brush up on your employment law review for 2021. Like I said, do the quick Google search in the labor code section 230. I think it's a fantastic first step in, again, making a plan so that when these situations do arise, that we can mitigate the negative effects and make sure that we're all ready to react appropriately.
Yeah, and I would say that one of the major takeaways from all the great information that you've both given us, or all three of you have given us, is that because there was some mention of harassing of coworkers potentially, and productivity and depression, et cetera, this is a benefit to the employers, right, Lauren? You know, it's not just compliance, it's not just the right thing to do, but if your employees are suffering from loss of productivity because they're afraid, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Of course, yes, being proactive about it and getting ahead of it on the front end, if at all possible. Again, the employer isn't the end all be all savior. However, addressing employee situations, not turning a blind eye and saying, well, I know that we're probably supposed to do this under the law, but proactively not approaching your employees to get into their personal life, but being very receptive when your employee comes to you. You have to remember that this is not a fun thing to talk about, and your employee's not going to be like, I'm so excited to get into work tomorrow morning, 8:30 sharp, and be in my boss's office to ask for this protected leave. No, I mean, I encourage all employers to meet their employees during these times with empathy and to try to, again, not get too far into their personal life. There is still that employer-employee relationship, but if you don't want to do it, like you said, for the good of your employees and to be in compliance with California law, it's happy employees affect bottom lines. I mean, people who feel secure and comfortable and not anxious, like you were talking about, Claudia, in the workplace, who feel, you know, taking that extra step, whether it's whether you think it's rational or not, whether the employee wants a lock on on the door if they're the only ones there during the day, whether they move their cubicle from the front door to the back so that they have more time when someone walks into the room. You know, it's impossible to know what everyone's going through in their life. And if these suggestions are made and they're easily accommodated, then it's only going to improve employee productivity when they feel safe and like the employer's responsive. So setting the tone of a responsive, constructive, let's figure this out. And yes, of course, we can make these small changes because it's only going to help the company as a whole and at the end of the day, the employer.
Yeah, thank you very much. At this point, I would encourage our listeners to put your questions in the chat. We will try to get to all of them. But in the meantime, Alor, do you want to talk a little bit about how ERC specifically supports its clients suffering from domestic abuse?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the question. Employer rights, like I was saying, started many years ago, and we realized that employment was one of the things that affected most by women. And so, our first and most important thing to say is that we are not only dealing with the wage and hour issues or the leave issues, but when we hear of this sort of situation, domestic violence or potential issues, then we make sure that we give special attention to those callers, meaning somebody's assigned to them, and then somebody is then followed with to see where are the resources that they need to get through. Sometimes, filing a domestic a restraining order, not so easy. Sometimes it's a little intimidating to go to the court. Sometimes people don't even want to begin. What I would tell you, in my opinion, which is, I would be very direct. A lot of people do not trust the system. A lot of people do feel embarrassed before even they get to the question about trusting the system. They don't want people to know about this. So I would tell you, the first 2-3 calls are just trust building, which is, I would tell you, a lot of what we are as a resource. We hope that if we give the phone number the first time or we refer to a law firm, that they would do that. We find that in general, they don't. So it's the special attention to it. I would tell you that we are very proud to say that the great majority of the people who work at the Employer Rights Center are women, and they're women who are interested in this issue. And so we all, in our staff meetings and what we do special follow-up on it. So we have employment attorneys that deal with discrimination. And so internally, that's how we deal with it here. But essentially, we help by being there, we hope, to build that trust so that people can then be handed off to the right place or agency to be able to follow up with it. That's our part of the work as a worker-centered resource center.
Yeah, and we're really excited that you have the Commission's pamphlet on domestic violence. Tiana, do you want to talk a little bit about that pamphlet?
Yes, we do have. Oh, sorry, I'm just making sure I'm still on here. Yes, we do have a pamphlet out, and we did distribute those, I believe, to the ERC, and we do have several that we've distributed throughout to educate the community on domestic violence resources available to you. And they are out there. So please contact us or connect with us at the Commission. We're happy to drop those off at your business locations or even schools. Anyone who may feel like they could use those. They're very resourceful.
Yeah, and we do have them in English and Spanish. It's called It Shouldn't Hurt to Go Home. And it's a very gentle sort of, but informative way of helping people who may be aware of the situation and want to know what to do about it, or may not know that they're going through domestic abuse. And this is a safe way, since it's just them and the book, to kind of trigger that understanding in their own mind. At this point, I just want to.
I just want to say one comment that I want to underline, because something that I think some people feel comfortable distancing themselves from this issue, because they think that because they are in a professional class, they won't be affected by this. Or they feel that because they have resources around them, a church, an institution, that somehow, that won't get to them. Mm-hmm. We are here to attest that attorneys doctors end up calling at a resource center like us to say, it took me months to just have the courage to call. So I can't say enough about how important it is to be in each other's lives and feel the sense that this is a hard process. And I think that's why we think it's so important to have the discussions and invest. I think it affects all of us. And hopefully more and more this kind of discussion will open up the lines of communication between all of us about it.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm just going to close with a reminder that we're doing another one of these episodes next month on the second Tuesday. That's when we do this at 2 o'clock. So it's January 12th. And we'll be announcing the topic as we get closer to that time. And then thank you again for ERC for hosting this, for having the wisdom to understand that our community needs these kinds of conversations, and to all our guests, Tiana, Claudia, Lauren, for the wisdom that you impart, and also to let our community know that resources like the Commission, like Lauren's law firm, like the District Attorney's Office, they are out there for those in need. So thank you again. Happy holidays. Please be safe, and farewell.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.